Hello, and welcome to Japan Expert Insights. You're probably wondering what happened to the third person. We usually have somebody right in the middle here that we're talking to. Not this time, partially because it's our 13th episode and we just didn't want to curse anybody like that. But also it seemed like a good time to do two things. One, to just kind of briefly discuss how the half year has played out so far. And also to talk about my screenplay from Chicago to Osaka, which is getting attention again. And that's very exciting. So as always, Maya from Tokyo is with us.
Yes, hello.
Hi. Another fun fact, this isn't live. If you're watching this, I am right now with the Japan American Service Committee, Japan American Service Committee. And what they are is they're an organization out of Chicago. And what they do is they do a lot of cultural programs, and they have a legacy center. They do a lot of community services. They basically bring a lot of Japanese culture to everybody here in Chicago. And that's just a very, very cool thing. And so if you're watching this, it's too late to go because it's already 8 o'clock Chicago time. But they are having what they call their Cranes and Cocktails party. And it's a wonderful organization. So if you're really into things that are Japanese, I highly recommend them. Go to their website, jasc-chicago.org. That's JASC Chicago.org with a little dash between the two C's. And they're just they're a great organization, and give them support. You can become a member, you can just donate, you can volunteer. They're a great organization, and I'm happy to be a part of it. It's one of 3 organizations I'm a part of now here in Chicago.
Woohoo! A busy person, yeah.
Yeah, the Chicago Japanese Club, which is a wonderful organization. And the other JASC is the Japanese. Oh, I always get my acronyms wrong. It's crazy.
Me too.
Yeah. The Japan American Society of Chicago is the other one. So there's the Japanese American Service Committee. And that's in Chicago, and that is jasc-chicago.org. And then there's the Japan America Society of Chicago, which I'm also a member, and they're also fantastic, which is jaschicago.org, actually. So if you can remember those, look them up, find them. You can just do a search and, send them a few bucks, because they do a lot of wonderful things for the Chicago area and for the Japanese community. So that's my plug that they didn't pay me for. I'm just speaking from the heart. So,
right. Yeah.
Right. So I'll be in my suit. What will you be doing when we're usually doing our podcast, Maya?
Oh, well, if you're asking me about the past week, we have been practicing quite heavily with Tim Sullivan. Many people probably know him, right? Because we are preparing that cross-cultural training course, and it's been a while since we did that, maybe 5 months. So we are, very, very hard on this. But anyway, otherwise, Japan. It's really interesting to me because the area of Tokyo I live in is, I would say it is kind of on the periphery of the city. It's still within the 23 wards of Tokyo. But we are very close to Saitama, which is the neighboring prefecture to the north. And then when we moved here 10 years ago, I was almost the only foreigner. So there was, a couple of Japanese girl and I think an American guy who used to walk their dog here, in the vicinity, and that's how I got to meet them. And then they went back to the United States, and now, the girl's dad walks the dog. And we were the only foreigners back then, right? So now, when I go to work in the morning, when I come back from work in the evening, and when I just go for a walk on the weekend, there are so many foreigners in this area. And it's fascinating to me because, Tokyo has changed, Japan has changed so much. And it's not unusual to meet somebody who was obviously not born here or raised here, doesn't speak the language. So it's foreigners are everywhere, which is a great thing as well. I know that many people may not be entirely happy about this, but I think it's a good thing for the country because yeah, this country needs a lot of energy. It needs a lot of people. It needs, a lot of action, actually. And that's what I have noticed recently here.
And it kind of leads into why we're doing this podcast in the first place. So for those of you who are just joining us for the first time on Apple Podcast, hi, how you doing? This is like, we just started this podcast because we love Japan, we love Japanese entertainment, and it was a way for us to learn more about the subjects that we love. We always say we're not the experts, we bring in the experts. And so far, our guests have been just nothing but extraordinary. Our first guest, we started with, Waka Ikeda-san, and she talked about the future of Japanese entertainment and culture. And I think the couple things that we really learned from her, and this was our first episode right from the get-go, was that obviously Japan is a hot spot for entertainment right now. All eyes are on Japan after Shogun, and that there are some hurdles that the Japanese entertainment industry needs to get over, especially in terms of budgets and in terms of, just widening their audience. We also learned that a little bit from our second guest, Douglas Montgomery, who talked about how sometimes there's a Galapagos syndrome with Japan, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
all about the Japan, but not necessarily getting out there. And there's for a variety of reasons. One, because they kind of like keeping everyone, at arm's length, don't not necessarily want too many people coming into our country at once. But also because they aren't trained to think that way. They're very humble and don't think, well, why would anybody be interested in our entertainment? And people very much
Right.
are. But it was interesting because even in those first couple of guests, we realized that the idea of that if Japan really heavily invested in doing entertainment in other cities that aren't just Tokyo. I wrote a screenplay about Osaka, which obviously is still a very popular place. We'll get into that in a little bit here. But if you write about something in Hokkaido or Okinawa, or Sendai, or any of the other regions that isn't the usual regions that people go to visit when they're tourists, you might be able to circulate people around the country and solve this tourist problem, which isn't going away. Sorry, Japan, you're too cool and you're too nice. People are in. I'm not
Okay.
one of them. I get it. It's
Right.
people are excited. So maybe we can create a bunch of TV shows and movies that get people to go around the country, not just hit the same old spots over and over again. Maybe that's
Yeah.
um,
If you don't mind me jumping in here, Michael, just a few points. I really love that you brought up the tourism
mhm,
issue, because I wouldn't call it a real problem. It is just mismanagement of tourist flows. Because, as you mentioned, there are only a couple of destinations here in Japan that get overcrowded. The rest of the country is not that crowded at all, right? So it's about, yes, just promoting the other parts of the country, those parts that want to meet and that want to welcome tourists, of course. But another thing is that, in relation to what you mentioned, that maybe through TV shows and movies, creating, movies about those parts that want to welcome foreign visitors and haven't been able to do that yet. So I think that I have noticed here in Japan an increase of the number of independent movie creators. So, because Waka Ikeda talked about the structure of the the filmmaking industry in Japan, and how, you have that committee here which decides how much money, how much, what's that? Well, once again, money, to be
but yeah.
dedicated to different works, and who gets how much and this and that. So everything is very structured, probably overly structured, and it's difficult for movie makers to make a lot of revenues, right? To get those revenues back. And I think this is, of course, because this way of working here is the way the industry has worked for, I don't know, several decades, right?
Mhm.
And this is how the Japanese work in general. So everything is structured. There is a hierarchical organization that decides this and that. But on the other side, I think that with the increase of independent movie makers, as difficult as their job is to create, and just get sponsors and everything, that increase is actually going to create demand and for independent movies as well. And also on their side, there will be demand for a more, how can I put it, decentralized industry. because there will be, there will be pressure there as well.
Right.
And I think that maybe in a decade, because Japan takes time with everything, but not very long down the road, or not very far down the road, we are going to see changes in this industry here. And these changes will come thanks to the increase of the independent movie makers in Japan.
Right.
I don't know, maybe you have a different opinion about
No,
this.
not at all. I think that's spot on. And I think like what was so great is, and I think people have really found our show. And by the way, if you're watching, thank you. I mean, the reason why the show is doing so well is because of you, the viewer. I know people say it all the time, it sounds cliche, but no, it is true. Thank you for watching and thank you for being a part of it. And if you missed some of our previous episodes, they're up forever. We're creating a wonderful database and resource. If you want to do production in Japan, we're hoping that this is the place you go. I mean, you think about it. Our third episode, we had Tatsuki Ichichi-san, and he had been in this business for so long. And he had just such a wonderful story to tell about being a distributor and a producer, and how he helped a lot of these independent films get an audience here in the States. Susan Miyake McCormick, who basically helps people in New York City find Japanese culture through her website, Japan Culture-NYC. Just doing fantastic boots on the ground work. Mark Schilling, who's the Roger Ebert of Japan, the reporter, the critic, who basically, just like Ijichi-san, has a long history and shared with us a lot of his insights about how the Japanese film industry has changed over the years. And then we had younger voices like Yanajimoto-san, Jackie Yanajimoto, who makes she's actually directed, produces, and distributes Japanese movies. And you can visit her work at Osaka Films online. We also had Moika, the reporter from The Economist, who talked about boys love and girls love, and how the Thai community had embraced this type of genre and had ran with it. And then now Japan is actually, it's coming back to them in a different way, and how these two cultures are sort of cross-pollinating. Also, the fact that queer entertainment just isn't something that's top of mind when you think about Japan, and yet here it is, and it's wonderful to see. I mean, we loved having Kei Kurosawa, who's a Filipino-Japanese actress, and she was our youngest guest. And it was just very delightful, and getting her viewpoint, being somebody who's new to Japan and just starting her career. And then her, the people that worked on the film Crosspoint that she was starred in, director Danny Ordiales, who's Filipino, and Sho Ikushima, who was a dancer. He had a very colorful history. Sho-san, what he's done in his life. But learning what it takes to make a movie in Japan, an independent film. We talked about the demand. Well, these guys actually did it. And then we had, and on the other end of that, the independent filmmaker, Mayu Nakamura, who shared her insights about being a female director in Japan and fighting the good fight, and just making films that are dear to her heart. And that's wonderful. I wish, it's wonderful to see a director do that, be that brave, and move and do the work that she wants to do, and not what the studio demands or what is going to be most popular. And her films are quite brilliant, so I highly suggest you check them out. And then finally, we had Fujiko on, who's, speaking of brave people, she's an Osaka girl who decided to move to the States to start doing stand-up comedy. If you're in Chicago, see her sets. She is very delightful and very, very funny. And then finally, I got to do that interview with Junichi Yasuda, who is the director of the film A Samurai Time, and Yuno Sakura, who is an actress, but also an assistant director of that film. And it was, we had Takahashi-san, I believe, was the translator for that. And thank God, because my Japanese, Nihongo ga skoshi desu, mada mada desu. Got a long way to go.
Yes.
So
but you're studying it, so yeah.
So yeah. So when you think about it, when you think about that group of guests, we learned a lot. I thought I knew everything there was about Japanese entertainment. I was wrong. There's so much more to learn, and there's so much more to learn. This sounds like a PBS thing. We're going to ask you for money. We're not, but there's so much more to learn. Just stay tuned. Our next 12 episodes are going to be like gangbusters, and I can't wait to reveal the guests that we have then. And we're going to bring back some of these guests. I'd love to get Waka Ikeda on the show again.
Oh yes, so very much.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me. Yes, I would love to have her back. And just a couple of things which I actually paid attention to thanks to the interviewees, our guest speakers.
Yeah.
So the first thing I wanted to mention is that thanks to Moeka Iida's podcast, I noticed that now there are a lot of posters at, Japanese, especially Tokyo train stations, a lot of posters about BL and GL, but predominantly BL, boys love. And I never, before that, I didn't pay that much attention. I didn't actually understand what BL meant, right? And then the other day when I went to get my daughter from her extracurricular class there, and I noticed, wow, look at these huge posters on the walls everywhere around the station, right? And they promoted a movie about, well, BL movie, and it was really interesting to me to notice the shift in acceptance, the shift in attitude, because Michael, as Moika Iida mentioned, so Japan was the first to talk about this. Then there was a kind of alienation from the topic, and now they're back thanks to the Thai industry, right? Entertainment industry and everything. So it's fascinating also to see how these topics they just circulate around, and they have a cyclical life, and they move from one country to another and then go back. So it's also good to observe. But another point that was very interesting to me is the point that Mayu Nakamura made, that basically as a filmmaker, as a female filmmaker, she says, yeah, it's difficult to be a woman in this business, but what is more difficult is the ageism, right? Because obviously, women, they can still say, yes, I'm making this movie and I'm making that movie, but because of persistent stereotypes, so a lot of funding is given to younger producers and creators, which is great, I mean, it's how, it should be. But also, the point, the pain point here is that film producers with more experience who still need the funding are being overlooked, right? And those producers and those creators being overlooked is not a good thing, because they still have a lot to say, and they have the experience to produce good movies, good documentaries, and everything. So it was really an eye-opening thing to me. That conversation with Mayo Nakamura was really something that I thought we should talk more about, actually, because when you talk more about an issue, the resolution of that issue happens sooner than later.
Yeah, and I think that's what's nice about our show is because we are technically gaijins who are coming in and talking about this, we can actually open up a path for people to talk about these sort of things that maybe in polite society you don't talk about just because you don't talk about. But here we can kind of like take on these issues, but do so in a very kind of nice and welcoming way. We're not pointing fingers. This isn't like hard journalism here. We're not that. But we are is just fans of Japan entertainment and Japanese culture. And, I always say part of loving something is also accepting its faults too and trying to make it better. And so, yes, for our next 12 episodes, you're going to see a bit of that too. So to wrap up, and I'm going to say to everyone, so Tawaka, Douglas, Tetsuki, Susan, Mark, Chiaki, Moika. Sorry, I always get her name wrong. I'm sorry, Moika. I will get her name right. Yes. I'm so sorry, Ida-san. Junichi and Yasuda, Kei, Donnie and Sho, Fujiko and May, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for being on our show. And it means a lot to us. And because of you guys, our show is just doing very, very well. And we couldn't be happier to have you on, and we can't wait to have you all back at some point. Yes.
We want you back.
Yeah. So for the second part of this year-end wrap-up, there's a little thing called From Chicago to Osaka, which people are like, okay, what's that all about? Well, it's kind of why I ended up here. So just for fun, basically to kind of talk about this real quick, it is a screenplay I wrote a couple years back. I've been refining it ever since. I think it's on its like 5th revision right now, but it's pretty much at its punching weight. This thing is dialed in, so it's pretty ready to go. But the idea is I wrote a romantic comedy set in Osaka, and it's basically because I realized Lost in Translation was the last comedy that had been written kind of like this, about like a couple that's in Japan. And I thought, I mean, it's a great movie and all. It definitely aged in a funny way. I still think it's fine, but obviously, like any movie that's 10 years or older, you don't make the same decisions. If they made Lost in Translation now, it'd probably be a very different movie, but that's fine. So, but that was the last time. It's been almost 25 years. It was time for a new romantic comedy set in Japan. So I wrote a movie I wanted to see. And so just for fun, using the technology at our disposal today, we created a concept teaser trailer for a movie that doesn't exist yet, but it kind of gives you the idea, the vibe of what this thing could be. So I guess we'll roll it, and then we'll start the second half of this this talk.
Let's go.
You got it. There we
I
go.
love it. Yeah.
Yeah, that almost seems like a real movie. When do I get to see it? I want to see that movie. I wrote it. Like you're just saying. But that's one thing you learn about this business is, and that's one of the nice things about these tools now, because people talk about, AI is going to ruin everything. Truth is this. I used AI to create a couple of those shots. I believe the woman who was painting, and then the two couple at the end. Those are AI shots. I mean, they're incredible. But obviously the problem number one is that you can't use that same person. So I'd have to tell the prompts, okay, I got that shot. But then I had another shot that was a wonderful shot of a couple, but they were facing you. But she did look nothing like the girl that was in the beginning. So it's I got to lose one of these shots. Which one do I lose? And so that's part of the thing about AI is that, yeah, it can do some cool things. It couldn't make that trailer. It could just do a couple shots for it. So I'm not too worried about AI taking over the entertainment jobs just yet. I think it's wonderful for pre-visualization. And if we get to make this movie, I'll definitely be using it to sort of come up with what the look and feel of the film should be. So before we actually shoot. So These are great tools to have. But yeah, they can't do it all for you. Not even close.
No, and I love that you say that, because at the end of the day, this is something that I always say, AI is, it works, it's a binary model, right? It works on zeros and ones. And no matter how much information it has, and it works with how much data it works, right? At the end of the day, it's still zeros and ones. And the creative brain of a human being still, when it comes to creative things, is still necessary. Because as you said, you are there to put all these things together the way you see them, and in a way that probably nobody else has seen them before.
Right.
So yes, and once again, AI is a wonderful tool, and it's just a tool. And I think that it will be quite a long time before we see something more from AI in terms of creativity. It is a wonderful help, right? It can help you, it can assist your creative process, but still you need to be there.
We're a long way from saying, give me a 2-hour, motion picture feature written by, so-and-so that looks like it was directed by Wes Anderson, and then it just outputs something brilliant. No, it can give you the little bits and pieces that you need. I think you're going to see a lot of great historical dramas in the in the future, because it's going to be a lot less expensive to produce those, because you can get those fire shots. You'll be able to generate those through AI. There's some cool things I'll be able to do. But anyway, so besides AI, I guess this is the part where you interview me. How does this work? This is a new experience for us, although you have interviewed me in the past. That's how we ended up doing this show.
Yeah, indeed. Well, and that's why you need to be there when the film is made, right? So, but before that, tell me about, how did you come up with the idea of the film? You mentioned this is a film that you want to see, right? You created a story that you want to be put on screen. But before that, maybe, what was the idea? Why? So let's go deeper.
Well, first of all, COVID. Let's be honest. COVID was a catalyst for a lot of things. Okay, so I'll give you the full story. So a lot of this started in 2017. I got really hooked on a video game called Persona 5. For those who know, I absolutely love this game. I hadn't played video games in a long time, and I started playing them a little bit. My brother gave me his old PlayStation 3. I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun. But I'm Irish Catholic, so I just can't play video games. I have to get an exercise bike and play video games. So at least I'm doing something while I'm playing. Well, it was my little cousin Matthew, and I always call him my little cousin. But he's like this tall. He's way taller than me now. He used to be a little, but not anymore. He said, you got to check out this game called Persona 5. It seems like it's right up your alley. And at that point, I was starting to really get into Japanese culture in 2017. I didn't like the direction where my country was going. I thought it was getting kind of goofy around here, and I don't know. And I always loved Japan, and I just started deep diving into the culture. So I played this thing, and I loved it. I thought, this is fantastic. And about halfway through it, I said, this would make a great motion picture trilogy. So a lot of people have, like, guys, I don't have kids. So a lot of guys have like fantasy football. They have things. I like make fantasy movies in my head. So for about a year, I just kept jotting down all these mental notes at how I would take Persona 5 and turn it into a motion picture trilogy. Why video games work and why they didn't, especially in those days. There weren't very many successful video game adaptations. Obviously now that has changed. I still think it's a very viable opportunity to make a great film trilogy or whatever. It's such a wonderful story. But then I realized no one's ever going to take my proposal unless I actually do something else first. So I kind of like put all those ideas aside, and I said, well, what if I wanted to do something? It should be something that would be like a lower budget, something that I could always shoot myself if I had to, something with like a minimal cast that's, that features a city in Tokyo, that in Japan that is in Tokyo. And then that's kind of how the genesis started. It was just basically, I should write something else that might actually get made into a film first before I even try to pitch a Persona 5 idea to anybody. Who am I? I'm a painter. I'm a designer in Chicago. Like, what do I know? And I hadn't worked in television in a long time. So on vacation during COVID, I think it was 2021, just started baking up this idea. Like, well, I love movies like Lost in Translation and Sideways, like in the early the early aughts. There was this sort of string of like very successful romantic comedies like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and so on and so forth. And, it's like, and then you kind of started, this is before Past Lives had come out and a few of these other things. And so I felt like, oh, I think there's an opportunity for a movie like this again. And that was it. It was just, what kind of movie would I like to see? I love Aaron Sorkin movies. I love the Lost in Translation. I said, what if Aaron Sorkin had written Lost in Translation? But for 2022, it's sensibilities have changed. Things have changed. So you write for this generation. And
right, yeah.
That was the genesis of it. Also, too, the fact that I'd studied Japan for so long by that point, and I was really trying to get to Japan, and I felt like, well, I may not get there for a couple more years, but I have all this knowledge. I'd love to do something with it, instead of just wishing I get to visit one day. I was like, well, maybe I can take this knowledge and all this stuff I've learned over the years and put it to good use. And so that was the catalyst of that screenplay. Was basically, yeah.
Right. And you have stuck to the project, working on it. You said that you have done, yes, a couple of editions.
Yeah, it was optioned for a bit, but then that fell through. Not to anyone's fault. Everyone did their best to get it moving. It just didn't happen. It happens in the film industry all the time.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, but I have full control over the screenplay, so I was like, well, let's give it a shot. Let's see what's what. And I really haven't thought about it a lot. But then when I started doing this podcast, obviously people were interested, and then it sort of generated like this. Oh, well, maybe we'll take a look at this, And also, too, I wrote the hell out of it. I mean, Waka Ikeda actually read. She loved it. I know Kate Kurosawa is a big fan. Some of our guests have read this thing, and they're like, yeah.
Right.
So that really feels good when a Japanese woman says you nailed it. Like you really dialed this in. And honestly, I mean, the first couple drafts, we were still working on that. But it's funny because a lot of the advice I had gotten in those early drafts, I ignored all of it. I just
okay.
I did a version, I think version 3, where I listened to everyone's advice, and then nobody liked the script. I'm like, forget it. I'm starting over from version 1, and I'm going to write it the way I want to write it. And that's what happened. So, and that's where we're at now.
Too many cooks spoil the broth. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple things. If friends of mine who made a couple suggestions that just little quirky things, and those were good. But what was interesting was a lot of the suggestions that I got, I didn't like, but they helped me problem solve in other ways. So it wasn't like it was all useless. It was like, well, I don't think that's right, but it helped me look at some things from a different angle, and that was very cool.
Yeah, Michael, I love this expression that dots connect backwards.
Yeah.
And some people have difficulty agreeing with it, maybe understanding it too. But dots always connect backwards. And because what you said, some of those pieces of advice, they didn't help you at that point of time. But when you looked back at them, maybe a year later or several months later, you learned something different, and still they worked in a
Right.
different way, unexpected, but still a good way.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah. I think it
I
was
think
me, the confidence to just double, triple down on what I thought would be right for the script.
right.
And
Yeah.
it turns out that became the best version. So
Yeah. And so, well, and could you just tell us a tiny bit about the story?
sure. Yeah.
A
Okay.
tiny bit. You don't have to tell the whole story. We don't want
No.
people to say, "Oh, okay, I have watched it." It feels like I have watched it.
No. Basically, yeah. So basically, an artist who's in his early 30s named Dylan Davis, who's from Chicago, through his old Northwestern college buddy, a guy named Naoki, gets invited to do an art show in Osaka because he's a painter. By day, he's a graphic designer. By night, he's a painter. That's a little bit of the autobiographical part, but I'm not close to 30. I'm a lot older than 30. So, but yeah, you can kind of have fun with that. So he gets invited, and of course, there he meets a girl named Haruka, who is engaged to a guy named Koji. They were both. He's a musician. She's an artist. But him, because they're 30, he realizes he's somehow in his head. I got to grow up. So I got to get a job and be a family provider and all that kind of stuff. And she's like, I helped my aunt run this gallery. I'm happy with my life, And he thinks, no, we need to settle down. You need to start having kids. Like he kind of gets trapped into this very traditional sort of mindset. And so it's not going well. Well, of course, Haruka meets Dylan, and then you just kind of see what happens. But the way the script is written, it's written very fast paced. It's written like, kind of an Aaron Sorkin or a 1940s screwball comedy. Because I thought, how cool would it be to write something that's that ping pong back and forth dialogue, but then goes to Japanese and then goes back to English. And the other most important part of this is that so many movies always play up the differences. Even Shogun, which I loved Shogun, but still, it's still the fish out of water tale. It's this guy, Caucasian dude hanging on Japan. I mean, they changed, that didn't change the story. What they did is they gave the Japanese, rightfully so, much more perspective. You got to see the story from their eyes as opposed to just the English dude, Blackthorn, which was very important and actually makes the stories just so much better. So that's how they kind of overcame that a little bit. But for me, I thought, even then, Tokyo Vice, it's always about the differences. It's always about how difficult it is to be in Japan. Not that there isn't some truth to it, but I just think it's boring. It's been overdone. Okay, Japan's different. America's different. Okay, fine. I want to do a movie where it's it's about the similarities and not about the differences, about the delightful similarities. You talk about Chicago and Osaka, because I had not been to Osaka, but just in the research, you realize, Chicago and Osaka have these great little similarities. I mean, if you talk to people who live in Osaka and who live in Chicago, I mean, they're very different cities, but the idea that they're both kind of a second city, Osaka's big brother's Tokyo, our big brother's New York, in Chicago, we're Chicago and Osaka are foodie cities. We're sister cities. We're comedy cities. We like our blues. We like our sports. And we also have cursed baseball teams. You start to realize, holy crap, there's so many little quirky, fun similarities. And that's what we decided to build. I decided to build a story around, was the idea of these similarities and having fun with that. And also the fact that, a lot of times the Japanese characters, are always portrayed as sort of kind of quiet or kind of goofy. They're kind of like side characters or entertaining characters or always kind of bowing or whatever. They're not taken seriously. Or they're the stodgy, Dudley Do-Right next to the crazy American. I thought, that's boring too. I've seen that too many times.
Right, yeah.
all the characters are on the same page, the five main characters, and they're all keeping up with each other. And it isn't a white savior film. This isn't the cute Japanese manic pixie dream girl savior
Mhm.
film. All the characters are flawed. All the characters are dealing with stuff, and they're all on the same level.
I love that because we, as you mentioned just 5 minutes ago,
Yeah.
we are so concerned with differences. We always look for differences, and we always try to not stereotype, right? To
Yeah.
stereotype the other people, and sometimes we create negative stereotypes, which eventually fulfill themselves because we fail to step in the shoes of the others. And I think that basically we are only able to establish human connection when we see that we are the same as the other person. And
Right.
what you're doing is just so beautiful. And I love it. I cannot wait for the movie to be made and to watch it.
I hope so.
So
I mean, it's. I mean, it's a damn good script. I mean, I worked. I did my research. That was the thing. I mean, I've written stuff in the past. I've written screenplays in the past. I'd written a film about what if Charlie Brown grew up, called I think it was Where Did the Time Go, Charlie Brown. I wrote it like 25 years ago. It was like my college thesis project. It's actually at the Charles M. Schulz Museum Archives. And I probably change a lot of things in that script now, 25 years later. But I've written a few things, written a few pilot episodes. I worked in television for a little bit, and I was like, yeah, this seems like it would be a heck of a lot of fun to do. Plus, who knows? I get a trip to Japan out of it. At the time, I hadn't been in Japan yet, and I was doing anything I could to get there. And who knows? Still might. I mean, for anybody, it's like, I think, people will say, well, where's the drama when it comes to if there's no conflict between the Japanese people and the American people? Oh, well, there's plenty of drama. The characters have to overcome themselves. That's a lot of it, and
Mhm.
also too, they're dealing with their own issues that have nothing to do with culture per se. I mean, a little bit. Dylan is going through some post-traumatic stress because he was caught in a mass shooting in his hometown. He's at a grocery store, and some people get shot. And so that's part of what's propelling his emotions to. He always wanted to move to Japan. He thought it'd be kind of fun, but now he's like locked in, and part of it is from this stress. And for Haruka's character, her parents died when she was a teenager. And so I wanted these characters who are both, it's very human. It's nothing to
Right.
do with them being Japanese, although some people can say, well, the mass shooting thing is a very American thing. And I've had so many people tell me, you should probably cut that part out. And I'm like, no,
Hmm.
you don't cut that part out. Well, a tornado hits and that's what gives them stress. That's stupid. Like, it has to feel real. And it's not like we glorify it or anything like that. An interesting take that we do is that all the flashbacks are done as anime. So when you see his
Oh.
flashback in the grocery store or her flashback recalling on when her parents don't come home, it's drawn as anime because emotionally they're trying to separate themselves from the incident. And I thought that would just be such a delicate way to do that. And also too, to take away some of the, some of that anxiety, because this is a very funny film. And that was one of the
Mhm.
trickiest parts, was to get that tone correct, because I think you need to have something very serious, which makes the comedy all the more rich. If it's just people being funny, it's cute. It's a Hallmark
Mhm.
movie. But if there's some real pathos, if there's something that's kind of dark underlying it, then all of a sudden it becomes profound. And I felt like the story needs something like that. And the real trick was, when in the process of writing and rewriting, was how much do I want to play up that sadness and that sort of inner turmoil, and how much I want to play up just great dialogue. In the end, the great
Mhm.
dialogue won a lot more. But I think I hit that right balance of keeping it kind of light and exciting, but also being able to say a few things about both
Oh,
societies in a very nice way.
yeah, I cannot wait to watch that movie. So,
Yeah, but we just got to shoot it first and edit it and put
right,
it together.
okay.
But yeah, when it gets done, it's going to be fantastic. I hope so. I
I'm
mean,
sure,
hopefully, yeah.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I love it because there was a period of time when the action movies coming out of Hollywood and coming out of other national movie or film industries, let's say, in Europe and Eastern Europe as well. People were much more into that lightness of the story. So it was like there is a protagonist. He he has a problem, somebody, just wrongs them, and they go shoot a couple of people, and then at the end of the movie, everything
Yeah.
is good.
Yeah.
But I think that, once again, as you mentioned earlier, the pandemic actually sent us back to the point where we want more depth in the stories, right? We want to connect on a very real level with the characters in the movies. So, and that's what I like. One of the things I liked, one of the things you said, that you want the movie to feel as real as possible and the characters to feel as close to those who watch them as possible, because when we feel that, we can relate to them, right? We relate to them, we can feel empathy, we understand, and we understand the levels of trauma and the levels of sadness, the levels of happiness, and also how they deal with the challenges in their lives, right? So I think that's what more and more people are looking for nowadays, instead of just, watching a doom story. So,
Yeah.
or a
Well,
bam bam story.
yeah. I mean, we get that, and don't get me wrong. I love my John Wick movies. I mean, I'm sure ethically we'll probably think about those differently in 15 years, but I think
Hmm.
I love action films. But I think also too, from a cultural sense, it's interesting, and I think Japan has these rotations too. But in America, especially, you think about it, like the late 60s to early 90s, and then kind of into this late 10s, early 20s period, where, the kind of the counterculture movement kicks in. It seems to be like this 35-year cycle. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact, like, the boomers was one of the biggest generations, and then the millennials, whatnot. Like,
Hmm.
I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure it gets kind of routed in the Strauss-Howe generational theory, but I've never been able to map it out exactly. But I can say that it seems like every 35 years, the counterculture movement kind of surges in America, driven by various factors. And there's sort of a hiccup. There's a minor counterculture movement that kind of happens in between that. You think about the late 70s and the Ramones and the CBGB era and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, and then you had grunge, and then so here we are, and then like in the early O's, we had like the garage rock kind of, like, we had then like rated R movies were cool again, because in the late 60s the hippies were very
Mm.
much about political correctness. In the late 90s it was all about political correctness. I mean, that's where it
Right.
comes from. And then in the late 10s and early 20s we had like the Me Too movement, and we had the woke movement. It's the same movement, but a different flavor, and
Mm.
addressing the
Yeah.
problems of each generation. So these are important topics to have. But I always say, you see the pendulum swing, and now I'm even like in the cutting edge of, being with Fujiko, and seeing her like do a stand-up, and you see the other stand-up comedians she hangs out with. The material they're doing is way, way like hard in the paint. Like they're definitely, you're seeing now the switch. We went from wokeism, and now you're going to see it swing all the way the other way. And that's just what it does. What this has to do with my film, I think in the end, I wanted to write something that was of this time. I think that was the most important thing. That felt like, because it's interesting too, because some of the problems, like the main character is a white guy who has who's partially Filipino. That's me. I'm a white dude that has a little bit of Filipino in me, because nowadays people, I think it was Danny Boyle recently, who talked about how he would not direct Slumdog Millionaire now because he
Yeah.
feel like it's inappropriate. So part of me would love to have written the characters all Japanese, but can I do that? Is that appropriate? So I made the one character basically sort of like my alter emo, but just 15 years younger. And then the Japanese character, like, but it was a very delicate balance. I was very conflicted about that in the beginning stages of who I
Mm.
wanted to write, how I wanted to write this character. And this first one out, I thought, well, I should probably just write what I know, because I never would want to be accused of appropriation or anything like that. And that really isn't the case. This is all cultural appreciation. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, we can really go on and on about cultural appropriation, and it is always about appreciation. From my point of view, when it is done with respect, you cannot call it appropriation. It's just how you show your appreciation of those cultural values, right?
Right.
And traditions and everything.
And also
So,
based on fairness. Like if you're a fashion designer who borrows like patterns from some poor tribe, in the Sahara, in Africa, and you steal their patterns and you make a lot of money and you don't give anything back to those people, yeah, that's a problem. I mean, that's the thing. So there is a case where it is appropriation if you're stealing from somebody else's culture and you're not paying them homage or giving them a monetary value, and especially if there's one culture has a severe advantage over another culture. Yes, that is a problem. But if you're one of the top 10 cultures of the world, it's kind of par for the course. You can't be that powerful and people not steal from you. But it's interesting because even when you look at like Japanese, cultural history, they always talk about when they were starting anime, they were borrowing from Mickey Mouse's Big Eyes. That's how they started. And so there was a lot of borrowing going back and forth between Japan and America. And I think we've talked about it in some of our previous episodes. The spaghetti westerns, came from Kurosawa movies, samurai movies, and vice versa. And we've kind of bounced back and forth ever since. So I hope that the film kind of continues that tradition of sort of borrowing from each other and making each other better for it.
Yeah. I do believe that when you learn, when you study other cultures, and when you borrow some ideas from them and adapt them to your own culture, basically you come with something better. And it is more often the case than it is not. So I personally don't see, any damage in doing that if you keep, being respectful, if you give also credit where credit is due. That's, yeah, and we cannot escape it. And the more popular something becomes, the more people mimic it or copy it or, yeah.
Well, we came from a generation where we tore down walls. The Berlin Wall came down. And it seems like, and part of the problem is you always have to be careful about, sometimes you do the right thing and it leads to bad consequences. And this happens a lot in human history. And although I believe, we should make sure that, cultures are appreciated and cultures are, we do keep a certain sort of autonomy between different cultures. And we make sure that, certain cultures, like if I'm trying to think of the best way to word this, because you don't want to get yourself in trouble and get yourself canceled before the movie even gets made. but it's like, you have to be very respectful of the cultures and whatnot. But at the same time, what you don't want to end up perpetuating a sort of neo-segregationism where it's like, well, only certain people can do this type of movie, only certain people can do this type of movie, because then before you know it, we're back into separation again, and we think it's a good idea, and that just leads to a lot of the 1930s, what we're heading into right now from a geopolitical standpoint. This is a very scary time. This is not the time to be separating each other, even if the intentions are good. We need to find our commonalities and bring them together, because that's what the world really needs right now. And entertainment is in a very unique position to do that. The Japanese understand that. I mean, the whole thing with the Cool Japan movement, there's a reason why Japan has an 87, 88% likability rating. They just have great anime. They have great attitude and they have great entertainment. There's something about how they project this culture that just wins people over. And it's a wonderful thing. So you just hope you can be a part of it and do something good with it.
Very much so, yeah.
So I guess we're talking about this film. I mean, right now we'll see where it goes. I might do another trailer for it. We'll see. And I'm working on a couple other scripts right now, probably this year. Also, I kind of have my Japanese trilogy and actually have a sequel to From Chicago to Osaka. Not written yet. I started that. I got about 20, 30 pages into it. But it's kind of a planned trilogy, kind of like Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight. The ones with Ethan Hawke and Julia Depley that was done by Richard Linklater. So I kind of have the idea. I know what the first and second movie are. I'm still trying to figure out what the third movie is going to be. But obviously the second movie is set in Chicago. So
well, that's definitely something I want to hear more about too.
Yeah. I'm not sure where that's going to go yet. We'll see. But yeah, it's been a wonderful journey so far. And I think we were talking about all these cultural things and stuff like that. I think right now, getting kind of back into what we were saying before, this is kind of like Japan's moment. And so for everybody who's watching us, let's see where this goes. Let's see. And I'm hoping everybody finds this information valuable. If you want to
I
make
do
a movie.
too. Yes.
So I get, it's funny. We're talking about like, oh, we can wrap this in half an hour or 40 minutes. And here we are in the 50-minute mark.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So here we go. So what should we wrap up? How should we wrap this up, Maya? This is so weird because we don't have a guest.
Well, once again, I want to say, again, I want to say thank you to all guest speakers who trusted us and who came and who shared their experiences and their insights about the Japanese entertainment industry, the filmmaking, and also the independent movie makers, and also comedy and everything, because the entertainment industry, as you can imagine, of course, when you come to think of it, it's not just the movie making, it's so much more than it. It's broad and it's diverse, and it covers not just, the screenwriting and the logistics, but it covers cultural values too. Sorry, I cannot help but say this. And yes, so thank you very much to all of you, the 12 of you. And Michael, thank you too for putting this together, because you have been just irreplaceable. That's what I can say. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you. And honestly, for those who don't, you people know me, hasn't been the easiest year of my life. It's been kind of a tough year. And so having this show and meeting so many wonderful Japanese people here in Chicago and being a part of this community, being really just going full into it this year, has just been such a wonderful experience. And honestly, has probably really helped me out. So for a lot of my friends here in Chicago, thank you. I owe you a lot. So, and thank you, Maya, for asking me to do the show and keep pushing me to do it. Because I remember I originally said no, because I'm like, I don't know, another gaijin talking about Japanese entertainment. Are they going to like that? But it was because of you and some people I knew. Actually, Matt Coombe, who I want to get on this show. We're going to get him on soon. And a wonderful gentleman who I'm going to probably see pretty soon, a guy named Neri Mall, who lives in Japan. And he basically did a lot of different entertainment. I think he worked on The Matrix. He worked on a lot of different things. He was a really cool guy. And they helped convince me to do the show. Plus, a lot of my friends who I worked with at Ajinomoto said, you should do it. So it's been a wonderful journey so far. And we're just getting started.
Yeah. And we'll continue.
Yeah. So it will continue in 2 weeks. We'll be live again. And our next guest is going to be a gentleman named Daniel Smith. And for those who don't know who Daniel Smith is, I mean, this guy is a producer and a director. He's just sort of the guy behind the guy, and you're going to love him. And then 2 weeks after that, a gentleman named Jeffrey Rowe, who is basically he's a motion picture. He's a founder, a producer. He works in a lot of different capacity. He helps a lot of different. He actually, what's cool about Jeffrey is he sort of embodies what we're trying to do with this podcast. A lot of cross-cultural entertainment, especially like with Japan and America. And so we're going to have him on, and a few others. I can't wait to bring these people in and just start. To have a third person here again, because it is a little weird when there's just this.
Yes. So we'll have in 2 weeks actually we're going to have a third person, and from now okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you everybody for watching. See you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks, and just tell your friends if you like this podcast. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues. Or if you want to be on it, if you're in this business, let us know.
Yes, give us a call on LinkedIn or shoot us email through Japan Expert Insights or boojazz.com. And finally, what was I going to say? We're on Apple Podcasts now. Is that official?
Yes, it's okay. Yes, we've got the account. It's going to be filled with content. Yes. All right. So
we're finally, people kept asking us to be on Apple Podcasts. We are now going to be on Apple Podcasts. So another place for you to listen to us. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. See you next time.